On the podcast today, we are going to dissect chapter 52 of the Tao Te Ching, which makes up the 52nd episode of the 81 meditations on the Tao Te Ching. And as usual, Guiyang will read Jia Fu Feng and Jane English's translation, and I will read Derek Lin's translation.
The beginning of the universe is the mother of all things. Knowing the mother, you also know the sons. Knowing the sons, yet remaining in touch with the mother, brings freedom from the fear of death. Keep your mouth shut, guard the senses, and life is always full. Open your mouth, always be busy, and life is beyond hope. Seeing the small is insight. Yielding to force is strength. Using the outer light, return to insight, and in this way be saved from harm. This is learning constancy.
The world has a beginning. We regard it as the mother of the world. Having its mother, we can know her children. Knowing her children, still holding on to the mother, live without danger all through life. Close the mouth, shut the doors, live without toil all through life. Open the mouth, meddle in the affairs, live without salvation all through life. Seeing details is called clarity. Holding on to the soft is called strength. Utilize the light, return to the clarity, leaving no disasters for the self. This is called practicing constancy. So this chapter is about the Tao as the mother, her children as the 10,000 things, and how we can understand through ourselves by fasting the mind through its application of Wu Wei. And so these two elements are some of the core principles within Taoism, fasting the mind and Wu Wei. We find this in the Zhuangzi text and also the Tao Te Ching. And also in this chapter, you see this through guarding the senses. But that comes later after understanding that the Tao is the mother and her children are the 10,000 things,
Yes.
which we are.
Yes, that's why lots are clarified in the first paragraph here. The mother and the son. The mother being, as you said, Tao itself, or Wu Qi, before the birth of everything. Or you can also say Brahman, in a sense. And the sons, the 10,000 things. So the material world, the material universe, which came from the mother, which came from the center of the universe, so that there could be like Atman kind of concept, and also material world, including ourselves as a species.
That's right. So Tao, in its original nature, is Wu Qi, is Tao in stillness. And so you can say Tao in nothingness or Tao in complete space, darkness, which would be similar to the womb. And so everything comes out of the womb of existence, so the womb of the universe. And so there is an inherent seed within the womb, in this case, which is Tai Chi, which is Tao in motion, which creates the 10,000 things. And so Lao Tzu here is kind of discussing that and saying that the Tao is the mother of everything, but its nature is soft, gentle, and complete nothingness, actually, as opposed to the 10,000 things where we're in this reality of duality, yin and yang, he said, she said, all of these type of opposites that from the mother's perspective don't exist at all, or the Tao's perspective, they don't exist at all.
Yeah, so if we understand the mother concept, so the Tao, Wu Qi aspect, then you will know 10,000 things. You will know the children of mother. So to be able to do it here, again, in the second paragraph saying it, keep your mouth closed and guard your senses. So they are basically saying guard your senses as in shut down your desires and temptations, and also the dualistic way of thinking as well here. So then everything will be taken care of. Life will just be smooth and easy for you. But if you do open your mouth and you stay busy doing things to fix everything, then the life will be beyond the hope. That means, things not going to go the way they should because you are kind of interfering with how it should be.
Exactly. In Egyptian mysticism, there's the Eye of Horus. And the Eye of Horus symbology is related to guarding the 9 gates, which is similar to this concept. And you actually find this in India as well, through Advaita Vedanta, this concept of guarding the 9 gates. And in Egyptian mysticism, the 9 gates are the 2 eyes, the 2 ears, the nostrils, the mouth and the penis, vagina, and anus. So you've got these 9 gates which you guard to protect your inner world. And so the point here is that you guard these 9 gates so that you can understand the Tao through your own existence, right? So you can't understand the Tao if you're interfering with other people's affairs. You can't understand the Tao if you have a lot of opinions and agendas and this and that. And this is why I feel sorry for a lot of people who are so addicted to social media and the media in general, particularly young people, because a lot of young people these days have a negative opinion of spirituality and God and Tao and everything, because it kind of circumvents and pulls the rug from underneath their own sort of way of thinking. Because their way of thinking is that you should have an opinion on everything and you should follow the herd and obey and this and that, where Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi are like, are you serious? No way. Like, why would you follow the herd? Why would you do as you're told? Taoism is a technology that critiques socialization. And so it doesn't just critique Confucianism, as it did in the Warring States period of China. It critiques all societies and cultures because it sees it from its original natural perspective, as opposed to being involved in a type of way of thinking or an ideology where Taoism is the ideology of no ideology. It isn't really an ideology, but I use that tongue-in-cheek because that's the only way some people can explain it. And so in guarding these 9 gates, you're guarding yourself from particularly things coming in through the eyes and the ears. That's the big problem, right? Because if things come in through the eyes and the ears, that can change the way you think, right? This is what the importance of guarding these 9 gates, so that you don't have your way of thinking warped or changed according to a narrative or a culture or someone else's perspective of who you are supposed to be, right? Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi are imploring us to lean into our own nature, to be radically human, to lean into our own li, our own organic pattern that was not touched by the world. It's inherently part of your nature. But nowadays, we say no to that. We say we should express ourselves in accordance with what the society and culture thinks is acceptable. And again, this is a complete disaster.
I think the big problem nowadays is that people are all really desiring to fulfill their temptations and desires. And in the old days, I guess it's a progress of time that things have changed, but maybe changed too much so that it in the end harms us in some way. So for example, like 50, 60 years ago, our desires were what? Just really fulfill the hunger, literally just hunger, like because we need to eat to survive, so that we need to eat and we need to sleep, this kind of a very basic desires, right? So those are the main desires that we wanted to be fulfilled with. But nowadays we have this desire to fulfill our I don't know, our head or something like that. I think if people don't fill their head with lots of stories, let's say, like tons of movies and TV series that there are available for us to watch, then that turn into kind of essential desires these days, just like how we need the food and sleep, for example, because they never learned to sit with their own boredom, or they never learn how to explore their own mind when they have spare time. So always what do people do usually? Always looking at the phone. Whether, just scrolling down to the social media feeds or watching something or reading news. It's just constantly there is the stories. They're literally stories. Even they say news, I just look at what's going on and this and that. But that is also kind of a stories, right? If you cut that off of your life, cut that out of your life, and if you don't take part in that sort of storyline, you're not interested in really what's going on outside the world. And also, nothing really changes, even if you don't know anything about what's happening outside the world, really. It doesn't affect you. But because we are so addicted to knowing all these stories, that the fulfilling the desires of our headspace is kind of becoming essential desires. I think it became essential desires. So that like if you don't watch something, if you don't have a TV series or movies that you're currently watching, it's like you're missing something, right? And you are hungry, in a sense. Your brain is hungry. Your mind is hungry. Why? Because you start to feel boredom. So that is kind of a terrible thing. It's actually very disastrous, I think.
Yeah. And you can't trust the media or social media a lot of the time, because the media, for example, has a political leaning. It has a certain political leaning, so it's not objective. And a lot of people have actually only come to realize that in the last 10 years through the advent of fake news and this and that. But it's always been that way. These media organizations have always had a political leaning, and usually those who have just got pure objectivity understand that. And so you are being manipulated by media networks that already have a certain agenda. They're not covering the news objectively. And people need to know that. You need to understand that. All of these networks all have a political leaning. And to speak to your point about how these create stories, right? Like you're watching these programs, you're binging on Netflix, all of this and that. It creates a story in your head. And this is what evokes sort of a hyper imagination. So people have this hyper imagination now where they drift off with their mind. They're so imaginative. And this is actually what's become probably New Age spirituality in some sense. Even though New Age spirituality has been around a long time, which basically, in a nutshell, is the over-sensationalization of Eastern spirituality through Westerners. And so a lot of that is related to imagination. So you'll see a lot of people just cook things up in their mind and say that it came to them intuitively, but it was just their imagination. You need to remember, Eastern spirituality is very grounded. It's not about leaning into your imagination. You lean into your imagination if you're writing a fiction book, because, you know, maybe there are some things to explore there. Maybe you could become the next Christopher Nolan. But it's not there for spirituality. You're not supposed to explore the depths of your imagination if you're trying to understand the nature of yourself, because it's just a story. Imagination itself is just a story, and the accumulation of samskaras within your subconscious. These are the subliminal imprints and mental impressions you've accumulated over your lifetime, and we are downloading so much more into our mind than ever before in history. And people say, why is there no great art created these days? Or why are there no great gurus these days? And it's because most of the time people are just distracted. And even those who refrain a lot from it are still distracted to a certain degree, right? Where the old masters and the great artists of yesteryear didn't have many things going on in their mind, so they could really hone into the depth of their being. And so that's one of the big problems, where people are getting so engrossed and involved in their imagination without realizing that that's actually eclipsing true understanding of the Tao, true understanding that Atman is Brahman. Because you're dreaming, you're cooking things up in your own mind, right?
Yes, I think it's the biggest problem with the people who are trying to understand Eastern philosophy is that because we are so used to think through some sort of framework, and we like to apply logic to everything and reason to everything, right? But Eastern philosophy is not quite logical or reasoning, or you can put any kind of framework, because framework itself is already learned, right, from your society and the surroundings and education and whatnot, right? Whereas Eastern philosophy itself has no framework, really, because as you say, it's so grounded. So, and it's very open. And all the Eastern traditions are teaching us to be away from reasoning and logic and unlearn everything that we have learned, any kind of framework, any kind of a logical thinking, rational thinking, they are all actually against Eastern philosophy. It's very ungrounded in a sense. Being grounded means that to be extreme human. Extreme human is what? We need to undo all this way of thinking of categories and dissect things and the separating things, put into certain fields so we can understand. No, it's not about that. We need to down-regulate that part of our brain. So we need to reach that intuitive sense. And that is what's really helping to understand the most fundamental essence of Eastern philosophy.
Yeah.
So people like to interpret their own way of, for example, Buddhism and Taoism, for instance, and they keep them in a certain way, and they apply these philosophy in their own imagination, using their imagination conveniently to suiting to their own beliefs, as in fundamental Christianity, or their own interpretation of Buddhism to apply to current narrative, for example, which is completely against what these Eastern philosophy is all about. Eastern philosophy is, again, to come back to very ground of our being and unlearn everything and strip out any kind of concept that we have learned. It's just going back to the really ground of being.
Yeah, that's a good point, because if you look at the problem with Westerners understanding spirituality, or understanding Eastern philosophy and spirituality, is that it's seen from an individualistic perspective and seen through a hardwired, ingrained Christian lens. Even though someone may say that they're atheists, for example, right, they still have Christian principles that they abide by subtly, and there's still that individualistic mentality. So you're looking at the Eastern traditions, which are not individualistic. It's about getting rid of the identity. It's about merging with the all, as opposed to making yourself somebody. So what you see in the West a lot now is, again, this comes from a lack of understanding, and this is part of the big problem with New Age spirituality, is people make a claim that they are enlightened, or they had their enlightenment. Nobody can have their enlightenment, because the person has disappeared. That's how someone is enlightened. So no one can claim it. So as soon as you hear someone claim it, that's a red flag on the plate, and you need to keep your distance from that individual, because they're obviously seeking attention, or they want something from you, or they want adulation. But you should not give it, because that is actually disrespectful to all of the great masters throughout Asia who have really attained moksha, or samadhi, nirvana. And so you can't go around claiming that, because there's no one to claim it. Ramana Maharishi never went around saying, I am enlightened, and people knew that he was enlightened and gravitated towards him. He didn't need to claim it, because there was nobody there to claim it, right? And so this is part of the big problem when Westerners try to understand Eastern spirituality, because they're thinking through an individualistic lens. And then so they're thinking about, how can this benefit me? Whereas Eastern spirituality is about, there is no you, and so it won't benefit you, but it will give you ultimate liberation. Not you as the person, but it will remove the person away from you, so that you can understand the true nature of the Tao, of Brahman itself. And that's part of the big problem, right? And so that's why in this chapter there's an emphasis on guarding the 9 gates, because if you don't, then these type of ideas can infiltrate your mind, and you'll start to think that you are enlightened, or you'll start to think about, as you said, Taoism and Buddhism in very strange ways, where Buddhism has been completely hijacked, particularly in America, where it's now a tool of activism, which would make the Buddha roll in his grave, because altruism doesn't have a political leaning. Altruism doesn't have a certain agenda. You just act altruistic, not according to a political narrative or what social media and the media are telling you. Buddha is telling you to keep your faculties together and don't go off with the fairies. You need to keep center of gravity. And so it's completely disrespectful to Buddhism and the Buddha himself as to what is happening to Buddhism in places like America, where it's used as an activist tool. And so to refrain from that and to understand the true nature of these traditions, as Lao Tzu recommends in this chapter, is that we need to guard the senses. And he mentions about keeping your mouth shut, right? This is very hard, right? So if you keep your mouth shut about things that don't matter, right? If you're just in conversation with your friend or your family he's not talking about this. Don't over-exaggerate it. But if you're talking in a sense where, you're speaking to someone about maybe a sensitive issue and this and that, you don't want to speak carelessly, because a lot of the time when you speak carelessly, a lot of untruths can come out. And this only causes problems for yourself and for other people around you. And this is why there is an emphasis on fasting the mind here, about keeping your mouth quiet and following the path of non-interference, wu wei, so that you don't create these problems for yourself, right? And with that, as what Derek says in his chapter, you're shutting the door, right? So you're shutting the door to temptations. You're shutting the door to all of these things in life that cause you problems. And so keep your mouth shut, shut the door to temptations, follow the path of wu wei. And this, in some sense, is a recipe for success for your life, because you don't encounter many obstacles in your life. You are coming back into alignment with the Tao, because you can't understand the effortless nature of the Tao if you're being effortful, right? And what I mean by effortful is not going out. I don't mean like you're going out there and doing your job, but mentally effortful. Like, I have an agenda to push, and I want to subtly push this on other people, or I'm an activist and I have an agenda that I'm going to promote through my social media network, or I hit the streets with my picket sign. And so this is anti-Tao. Yes. That's what it is. Taoism is not a tool for interference. It's a tool of path of non-interference. And look, I know that a lot of people may say that, well, it's very difficult to keep your mouth shut and this and that. But Lao Tzu is saying, like I said, keep your mouth shut in things that you don't really know enough about. I mean, and even if you know a lot about it, keep your mouth shut anyway, because it's only from your subjective viewpoint. It's not truly the way things are.
Keeping your mouth shut here also means that to slow down your way of thinking, I think. It slow down the speed of thinking. The reason why we speak a lot is because a lot of stuff is in our head, right? That's why we have a lot to say. But if you empty your mind, there is not much to be said, really. It's if you think it that way, it may be a bit easier. I need to say something, but like, is it gonna be a lot or a lot of words or not? Not in this way. If you just slow down your mind and just be selective with your own thoughts and be aware of your thoughts, and when you slow it down, actually you realize there is not much to be said, and you soon realize that all the speech that you have done was actually meaningless and pointless. In a sense, it's waste of energy, really. So if you slow down your mind, then you soon realize that there is not really much to be said. And if there is something to be said, it's all going to be something necessary or something fruitful in a conversation, for example, so that you naturally will have a less words to say, really. And yes, guarding your senses, in a sense that it's easy to say how to be, let's say, have a peaceful life. Peaceful life leads to successful life individually, personally, at a personal level. But to be able to do this, it's actually, method is very simple. You just stop listening to the news, you stop listening to what social media got to say, to show, and just stop it all together. And guard your senses and keep your mind into something very small. Here, the seeing small is insight. Right? Just pay attention and be more observant to your own life and to the world in general. Then you'll be able to see the world and your life in a more simplistic way. And in that way, things will be in order. Then your mind is not going to be as distracted, and it'll come to more of a calm state of mind, so that you'll be able to do things a bit easier. Like you said, mentally, having less, right?
Yep.
Not physically doing something. You go out and become an activist, fix this, fix that problem. We need to do something about it. It's not about that, actually. All we need to do and be aware of is that slow down what's happening in your head, really. Then physically, it'll just naturally will slow down.
That's right. That's right. And so, like, I like what you said about the small, because if you just look at your life and you just pay attention to your own immediate life and your immediate reality and what you can do in your life, then everything is easy. Nothing is difficult. In this day and age, because of the advent of the internet, people are thinking about problems in other parts of the world where they don't understand the culture, they don't understand the nuance of language, they don't understand the people, and so people are having opinions on things. These are bigger matters that are not for you to speak about. It's for those people in that area to concentrate on the small, deal with their own situations. And that's the problem in the modern day, because we're trying to focus on all things, right? Whatever the next thing is, we're going to try and resolve that. And nothing gets resolved, because you're just going from the next thing to the next thing to the next thing, and nothing actually gets resolved. People forget about conflicts after a week because they're already on to the next thing, whatever that may be, right? And so that's how shallow that type of culture has become.
Yes.
And so in this chapter, Lao Tzu's imploring us, in some sense, through fasting the mind and wu-wei, to come back to that motherly, nurturing quality of the Tao, the gentle aspect of the Tao, the softness of the Tao, because that's actually what truly transforms the world. It's not about being an activist. It's not about having your 2 cents on every matter in the world. It's about being soft, being someone that you can trust. You can't trust someone who's highly opinionated, because you never know what's going to happen with that person.
Yeah, but probably emotionally unsteady, and like you don't know who you're gonna get really.
Exactly, because like what you said with the unsteady mind, that those vibrations in the mind are vibrating and they're reacting to it, and we've all probably experienced this, that those who are highly opinionated and have a lot of agendas and this and that, who pretend to be pious, are the first one to throw you under the bus. You can't. They're not trustworthy people a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And so it's best to keep your distance. Follow the soft path. Be a nurturing person. Be a caring person. Be a forgiving and compassionate person. But don't be an opinionated person. Don't be a son of a gun. Just be a genuine person as you are, without all of these stories in your head. And once you slow your mind down, as Lao Tzu says in this chapter, as we're talking about guarding the 9 gates and those vibrations in the mind beginning to subside, then you can see the clarity in life.
Yes.
You can see into the subtle nuance and detail of existence. And you can understand that the small picture and the big picture are the same picture. But you can't understand that when your mind is vibrating at a high level with a lot of information and just garbage in your brain.
Yes.
You can't understand. You can't even see the reality. That's why Zhuangzi says in the Zhuangzi text, when there's no more this and that, I can see the infinite in all things from the still point of the Tao. He's talking about that Taoist Ching concept of getting rid of that species-specific essence, which in humans is a flaw, this ability to dissect between this and that according to your conditioning, according to your likes and your dislikes. This is what Maya is in Sanskrit, is the illusion of measurement, measuring the reality according to this. You've got to cleanse the subjective lens so that you can truly see the clarity of existence. And you can understand that oneness is the true reality. You can't understand oneness as the true reality if your mind is vibrating on a high level with a lot of garbage in your mind, and you've got a point about this, you've got an opinion about that, you're an activist about this situation. You'll never understand. You'll never understand the nature of existence itself.
Yeah, from that place, I think is you have actually the weak mind.
Yep.
I think from the weak mind, which means that you get easily persuaded by, influenced by all these ideas, and it's all borrowed, but because you want to be part of something, and you pretend to agree to that sort of agenda or narrative,
Yep.
and you become mouthpiece of that, right? And that is actually the weak mind. You don't have your own stance. You don't have your own center of your heart, so that you just move by someone says that you follow that, someone else says that, this, and then you change your mind just like that, which is very weak mind. But here again, the yielding to force is strength.
Yep.
And having the softness within your heart, it actually takes a lot of courage and strength, because a lot of people don't see being soft or being humble is any kind of strength, right? But that is a true strength because you are allowing things to be where they are without your own interference from your own conditioning, right? Interference all come from your own conditioning and belief that what is true and what is correct, right? Which is again up to interpretation. So you just allow things to be where they are and just follow that naturalness, that zutran. Zutran is naturally of itself, and seasons change without anyone's effort, right? It's effortless. When the rain comes when it's necessary, right? Naturally of itself. So without any force, things just all work it out on its own by itself. Yeah. And in a sense that we need to have a trust. Trust is something that from our perspective, trusting nature, right? Nature is always how it was and how it is and how it's doing itself. Before us, after us, it will be like that forever. If this universe has its time to end, there is another universe will be born. So it's always constant. Again, here it says constancy. This is learning constancy, that eternity. The eternity keeps going on without you, whether you trust it or not. So it's our point of view you need to trust. Trust means you are aware of that. That awareness comes into your heart that constancy is constantly happening.
That's right. We were at a river recently where the rapids were going, and we were discussing the constancy of the river, right? The river just keeps going. That's just what it's doing. And there's a constancy to this life that, for whatever reason, people aren't accepting in this day and age. And look, people haven't accepted it ever because Taoism has never been taken on lock, stock, or let's say Advaita Vedanta has never been taken on lock, stock as well. But there's this constancy, right? And so if you're caught in the constancy of life and you've got an opinion about this and that, then you're missing the beauty of what's happening in front of you. And we need to be a little bit like the farmer in the Farmer and Son Zen story, where the son went through a multitudes of ups and downs, and the village people were grief-stricken at one minute and then happy at the next. And then the farmer was always indifferent. His philosophy was like, we'll see. That's it, and we'll see. And so we'll see what's going to happen. But nothing is a final conclusion. People are going around acting as if that things are conclusive in and of itself. Like, oh, this is finished, that's done, we're on to the next thing. And it's like, but you're discounting constancy.
That's right.
You're discounting this eternal Tao that is ever present in this reality. And you don't even know that it's immanent within all existence. You're not even paying attention. It's immanent and it also transcends, but you can sense it in your life when you begin to slow those mental vibrations in your mind down so that you come to this place of stillness. Then you can understand that there's this constancy within life, and it's about aligning with that. Like you said, it's about aligning with Zitran, that naturalness. And then we will be like the farmer in the Farmer and Zen story. We will approach life with a we'll see mentality.
Yes.
And that's the final sort of conclusion for all of us on the path.
That's right. Again, we never should make any final judgment upon any kind of outcome in life. Always, yes, we will see.
We will see. And we will see you guys next time.